All right, we're live. Fredrik, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Uh, I thought we might start with I know you're a running technique specialist. Just tell us a bit about your background, how you got into that world.
Well, I've been doing all sorts of sports all my life. I started doing athletics like in 1974, and all the time growing up, I did a lot of mostly actually. My best part was high jumping and short put actually. So
Okay.
explosive things were my best features. But and then I was a coach when I was a teenager. I was coach for younger children for a time there, and I always liked the coaching part of athletics. I never been a really good athlete myself. I never been a really good runner. I am quite fast for my age, I have to say now. Short distances like 200 and 400 meters, but not super good. But I've been coaching a lot, and then as a grown up, I started also athletics, doing being a coach for many years, and in a triathlon club as well. And I I took all the courses that you can take in Sweden about how to be a good running coach. But my but the people I trained, they still got injured, and I got injured, and I started to think something is wrong here. Why do they get injured? What's happening? Why don't they run like Haile Gebrselassie? I tell them to do that, and they don't. And what's wrong? And and I I started to think about this. And I used to be actually a journalist um, for a couple of years. And it's the same thing with being a journalist. You investigate stuff. Why is it this way? Why? Who knows the answers? And that became my thing to figure out what's happening and taking more courses, and then the demand actually for me and my services became so great because I helped especially a couple of triathletes, and then they won like the Swedish championship and Ironman distance, and they said a lot of it is thanks to Fredrik. And people got injury free, and then after a while people just kept nagging me, and no, you have to help me, you have to help me. So I quit my job as a journalist in 2010. I did it just weekends and evenings up till then. But then I quit my job as a journalist, and I've been doing this full time since then. Just the biomechanic part. No training programs, no nothing like that.
Okay. All right, great. And you do compete in HYROX yourself, right?
Yes, yes. I had a couple of really good HYROX athletes at my place, Felicity Cole and Per Bergman, who came to me, and I had no clue what that was. HYROX, I don't know. And they told me, and I thought it sounded fun, and I've tried it. So yes, I've done now 5 races, and I actually qualified for the World Championships last year in my first competition, and now I qualified for Nice in June, both solo and in doubles as well.
Okay. Excellent. All right. So this might be a stupid question, but
Yep.
let's start off. Why should people worry about their running technique? Like, what difference can it make to them? And then also, like a follow-on question to that is, some people might say that your running technique is your running technique, and you probably shouldn't change it. And if you've been running for a while, you shouldn't tinker with it because that could lead to injuries. Um, yeah, how would you respond to both those things?
Oh, I heard that so many times, so many times. Running comes naturally. Yes, it does. And if you want to catch the bus, uh, your running is fine. You don't have to come to me to catch the bus or do whatever. But it's if you want to do something a little bit more and at a little bit higher level, it could be that the technique could be a little bit better, and that goes for everything. I mean, if you it doesn't matter if it comes naturally to jump. I can jump up and stand on a log or a rock or whatever, and jump over a ditch. It comes naturally. But if I want to jump a little bit further or higher, it could be a good thing to look at your technique if you want to become a long jumper or high jumper and you compete in it. And the thing is that you don't have the technique you have now is not something you were born with. All children have a good technique when they run. There's not a 3-year-old or 5-year-old kid that has a bad running technique, because they all run really well. They do. When I do lectures, I have a video of a little guy. He's like 2.5 years old. And I talk about this is how the professional runners do it. And let's look at the child. And then the next thing, look at the shoulders, look at the leaning, look at the foot placement. And all the time I go back and let's have a look at the child. And the child runs perfectly. It's so good. But most adults start to do, it's that they walk. And when you walk, you put one foot quite a bit in front of you, and you have almost a straight knee when you walk, because that's how you do it. You put the foot on the ground, and then you move your mass a bit forward, and you kind of gently just shift your weight from one foot to the other. And that's walking, and that's how you do it. When people then start to become a little bit older and think, oh, running, I should do some more running because I'm getting overweight, I'm soon turning 40. And they start to run, they do the moving pattern for walking, but fast with small jumps. So they do the same thing. They stretch out, straighten their knee and land in front of them, just like you do when you walk. But the thing you do is when you run, you land with most recreational runners around 2 to 2.5 times their body weight at their normal speed. So, and that is quite a lot. And you do it like 170 times per minute for quite a long time. And that is walking. And there's a big difference between walking fast with small little jumps and running. There are two different moving patterns, like trotting and galloping and walking for horses. Okay. And if you change it and people get injured, you haven't changed it in a good way.
Okay, makes sense. I asked our followers for questions for this conversation, and one question came in was, how much can proper running technique improve your split times without a change in fitness? Is that possible to quantify?
Yes, it is. It can do so much. It's not that uncommon actually for people. Not most of the people, my clients, they are not HYROX athletes. They are runners, mostly long distance runners. I work with some in the national team, who've done world championships and Olympics, but mostly recreational, normal people running, like the average HYROX athlete. And it's not that uncommon that people get in touch with me after a week or two and say that they really liked our meeting, and that's after one session, and they cut like, I don't know, 15, 20, and sometimes 30 seconds per kilometer during their long runs with the same heart rate as they had the week before. And that is quite a lot. And the best part of it is to get people to run injury-free. And then it doesn't really matter if your pace increases that much, because if you are injury-free, you will get the continuity in your training and you will get better with time. So just be injury-free to get the continuity. That's the most important part of becoming a good runner, of course. And I can help people with that. A lot of people come to me just because of injuries, not performance that they want to run faster. They would like to go faster, but to get injury-free is the first priority then.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I should say, like you mentioned, Pa Bergsman and Felicity Cole had come to see you recently, and I was chatting with Pa, and he was raving over the improvements that occurred just from this one session where he'd been struggling with his lower back injury, I think it was, for a long time. And after a session with you, he was feeling tons better. He'd done a sim that was his quickest ever sim in HYROX the other day. So, yeah, You obviously work miracles.
Yes, I do miracles. I can also walk on water. No, I can't. But if we talk about that, like Per, that he had pain in his lower back, and he had pain in his lower back for about 6 months. That's a good example of what you can do with running technique. So here's a really, really good HYROX athlete with lower back pain. And the problem with his running style now was that he someone told him that he should push off really good, preferably with his big toe, and get a really good push off. And that makes his feet move way too much backwards from the body than it should. And then the femur bends tilts the pelvis, so it tilts forward, and they get lower back pain. And a lot of people, recreational runners, they run kind of sitting down. That's a really common problem. When they run past a window and they see themselves in the reflection, and they look at that reflection and say, oh, who's that sitting down? But oh, that's you. But a lot of people have this sitting running style, which is not effective at all, efficient at all. And the biggest problem there is often, it could be 1 million problems, but a big one is that their feet travels too far backwards after the feet leaves the ground, after toe off. And that they don't rotate their hip, because when the foot moves down, it's a rotation of your pelvis. If I push off with my right foot, the right side of my pelvis should be rotated towards that side. Then I get kind of a longer leg. Sometimes when I talk to people, I talk about cross-country skiing, because I live in Sweden. We do cross-country skiing, everybody. And if you have longer ski poles, you get a better push-off than you have really tiny ski poles. And you can have longer legs by letting your pelvis rotate a little bit backwards. But most people don't have this rotation. They move the leg quite straight and have the hip straight, and they let the feet travel too far back, and then the femur kind of like bends the pelvis, as I said, backwards, and you have problem in your lower back. That's the first problem. And the other problem is that their feet is too close to the ground when their feet is moved forward again. After they have left the ground, a lot of people think that the feet should be close to the ground to save energy. Foot should not come up that high. But that isn't correct, because it's like when you do figure skating. If you're doing a pirouette in figure skating, if you hold your arms straight out, your revolution per minute will be very few. You will spin very slowly. But if you take and hold your arms close to your body, you will spin very fast. And the same thing, the physics works even with legs. So if you, instead of holding out your arms, you have really long legs, and your foot moves close to the ground when it moves forward. It takes longer time, and there's too much weight dragging behind the body, which makes the pelvis again tilt back forward, which makes you have this sitting running style. So for Per to get rid of his lower back pain, I told him that he must relax his knees a lot more. A lot of people have tensions in their thigh muscles, the quads, too much. So I helped him to relax the quads and to have this turning of the pelvis. And then he ran, and I held a broomstick behind him. I held the broomstick about a meter behind his back and told him, your heels cannot touch my broomstick. So we had to be a little bit quicker to getting the feet back, not traveling so much far backwards. So that's what I did. But the whole thing is more or less a chain reaction, because now if I tell everybody listening to this podcast, imagine that someone is running behind you with a broomstick and you can't hit your heels on the broomstick. they will over-engage their hip flexors and they will be very, very tired. So, but the power comes from the hip, and it is, I normally talk about kayak paddle movement. When you move a kayak paddle, it moves up and forward on one side and down back on the other side. And that's how the pelvis should move. And when you can get that power from also your core muscles and even your shoulders, it's a combination of how the shoulder moves, how the core moves to the hip, that makes him not hit my broomstick, which makes him not have a pain in his lower back. I know this sounds so complicated, but all I did was trying to tell him, like, imagine you have knee prosthetics and you have a lot of oil in your knee prosthetics, and just try to not hit my broomstick, and everything was just fine. And the pain went away. And he had pain now for 6 months. And the last week has run a lot, and he has been running fast and no pain at all.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. All right, so
that was a very long answer. I'm sorry. I'll try to do it next time.
No, it's good. It's good. I like it. Maybe this naturally follows on, but I was going to ask you about cadence, and you often hear people talk about the optimal cadence for running, whether that's like 180 times per minute or 170, 180. That's what people should be aiming for. Would you agree with that? Is that correct? What's your thoughts?
This is also, I'm afraid, a bit complicated, because you can't never say that 180 is an optimal cadence, because it's not. If you look at, for instance, the World Championships in marathon in 2017 in London, the World Athletics did a big study of the cadence of the marathon run, all the marathon runners and 10,000 meter runners and all runners and disco throwers and everybody. And they looked at a lot of things, like, for instance, their cadence. And if you look at top 8 women, top 8 men in the marathon at that World Championship, they had a cadence around at one of these measuring stations about, I think it was like 165 to 195, something like that. And that's a big difference. It's like 30 steps per minute almost. And that's the top 8 runners. So, and they were evenly spread between these numbers. So it wasn't like everybody was at close to 180 and then one was at 165 and one was 193. They were evenly spread. And it depends a lot of what's best for you. What kind of muscle fibers do you have? How is your muscles connect to your bones and what you look like? And even if we can talk about like a guy like Mo Farah, he normally has a slower cadence than most of the runners in the field. And if we look at the 10,000 meters at that World Championship in 2017, I think it was that he had the difference between his lowest cadence and his highest cadence during that particular race was 170 to 207. So there's a big difference. No, it wasn't 207. I think it was at least 27 steps per minute was the difference between his lowest and his highest. So you can't say Mo Farah has this cadence. Well, at what part of the race do you mean? Mm-hmm. And because it's very tied to your pace. The faster he ran, the faster a lap was, the higher the pace, the higher the cadence. The higher the pace, the higher cadence. And look at sprinters, their cadence is insanely high. I think Shelly-Ann Fraser-Pryce has a cadence about, I think it's more than 290 steps per minute. I mean, it's super quick, but she's very, very tiny as well. But it's always connected to your pace. But you could say that a lot of recreational runners have a little bit too slow. Their cadence is a bit too low. And what happens then is cadence is very closely connected to how much you move your center of mass up and down. And what costs the most energy when you run? It's moving your center of mass up and down. So how do you decrease that number? Well, take a bit for more steps per minute, then you will decrease that. You will move less up and down. And that's a good thing, because then you also probably will lower your vertical forces, so forces that goes up through the body when you land. So it's a bit more gentle on the body, and you save energy because you don't have to move so much up and down. So if you have a low cadence, like, so the numbers you said, around 170, 174 is, that's really good numbers for most people. But since it's also depending on your pace, you have that fast friend that runs 10K in 40 minutes that says, well, I have 180. I know because you run faster than me. So you have a higher pace, a higher cadence, because you run faster. And there's always exceptions to this rule. Like Jim Wolseley, one of the world's absolutely best ultra runners. He's got the course record for Western State hundreds. He runs like trail runs for 100 miles. Sometimes he has the cadence of 155. And you can't tell the guy who is the fastest ultra runner in the world that your cadence is too low. You have to change it, and then you will be faster. But I'm already the fastest, so shut up. But you have to take in consideration how is he built. But for most part, 170, 175, that's probably fine for most HYROX athletes. They're doing HYROX in about 90 minutes, I would say.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And one reason I think often cadence is often talked about is by getting to those higher numbers like 170, 180, you're less likely to heel strike as a result.
Yes. You say it like heel striking is something bad.
That's my question. That's my question. Is that a problem or not?
The problem is not which part of your feet or your shoe that touches the ground first. The problem is where you put your feet down, how you put your feet down on the ground. Okay, let's go back to the study that was made 2017 in London World Championship, and we can look at the marathon runners once more. And we can see it was about 70 men, 70 women in that competition. And then when they look at 4 different measuring stations, at one of these stations, 3% of the participants had a forefoot strike. About 70% were heel strikers, and the rest was midfoot strikers. So if you have a friend that tells you that you should land on your forefoot because all good runners, all fast runners do that, well, if 97% of the people running the World Championship, Marathon Championship, don't put their forefoot down first, how can you say that all good runners put their forefoot down first? Because they don't. We have statistics of this. I mean, it's just ridiculous. It's Brigitte Kosgei held the world record for many years. Clear heel striker all the way from start to finish. And if you're the fastest one in the world, you can't say it's bad. But the problem is now that the marathon runners in the World Championships, they run really fast. And when you run faster, it's more okay to land a little bit further in front of your center of mass. So now it's getting complicated again. If you run really slow, if you do your 1K at a HYROX race in like 7.5 minutes, the place where to put your foot down on the ground is very, 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 very close to your center of mass. It will not be completely under your center of mass, because then you will fall over. It has to be a little bit in front of your center of mass, but we're talking about like 4 or 5 centimeters. The faster you run, the more okay it's to touch the ground, which we are talking about. Landing is the place where you touch the ground. So if your heel touches the ground a bit in front of your center of mass, like 12 centimeters in front of your center of mass, if you run fast enough, you have time to move your body forward. So when you get to mid-stance, when you have the most pressure on your foot, the foot is under your center of mass. And that makes it probably more okay for fast marathon runners to put their heel down first, because they can land further in front of the center of mass. But if you're a clear heel striker, when you run slower, if 1K takes 6 or 7 minutes, it's probably too far in front of your center of mass. But the problem is that you land in front of your center of mass, not that you put the heel down first. A lot of people have heard that they should run on their forefoot. They still overstride quite a lot, but instead of letting their heel touch the ground, they press down their forefoot. And the only thing that happens there is that forces will move. You will probably have a little bit less forces going through your hip and knees, but everything below your knees will have a lot of forces to deal with when you land on your forefoot, and it's still an overstride. Like your calves, your tibia, Achilles tendon, your ankles, and your feet. So forces don't go away, they just move. And that's the problem. The problem is never which part of the foot that touches the ground for most people. It's how you put it down and where you put it down.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there a danger with, like, when trying to adjust or improve your technique, that it gets, that your speed or like your heart rate at a certain speed gets worse initially? Is there like a phase you have to go through perhaps to adjust, or should you notice improvements reasonably immediately?
Immediately.
Okay.
Sometimes when I meet people and I tell them what I do for a living, and then they say, "Oh, I tried to run with a really good technique, but I think it was so hard, so I stopped doing that." But if it is harder, if it costs more energy and your pulse goes up, it's not easier, and then it can't cost less energy. It should be easier right away. But the thing is that people change what they see. They see that okay, so they don't see that people overstride. They say you put your heel down first, and then they tell people don't put your heel down first, and the only thing they change is the angle in their ankles. So they tilt the foot down so the forefoot touches the ground first, but that could be even further in front of their center of mass. And that could also increase braking forces and probably also lateral forces when you land so much in front of your center of mass. And then it feels a lot harder. And then you tell all your friends, well, I tried to run with good technique, but it felt harder, so I'm not doing that. I run in the way that feels natural for me. And the same thing with cadence, because a lot of people have tried to change their cadence. And you shouldn't try to change your cadence. You should try to change how you move. And then we can change your cadence. It changes by itself. Again, figure skating, doing a pirouette, you spin really, really fast. If you hold your arms out, straight out from the body, you will spin slow, and bring the arms close to the body, you will spin faster. You would never tell a figure skating with slow pirouettes and holding their arms straight out to the side, well, just spin faster then. and then they said, oh, I think spinning faster, I think that's harder. I think this pace of spinning, that's natural for me, so I will keep this pace. But that's so stupid, because that's not how it works. The cadence is a consequence of how you move. So what I do, I normally, with people that have a too low cadence, their cadence is too low, I change a little bit the angle of their elbow, how they move their shoulders, and then all of a sudden, instead of like 167, they can have 179. I have 3D cameras here at my workplace, and I can measure how people move by 1/10 of a millimeter, how much energy they cost, how much load they put on their joints, and a lot of things. So I've had the cameras for 10 years now. I've done about 10,000 tests. So I'm not guessing this. It's not guessing. I've seen it so many times. And it's and then they have this go from, I don't know, 165 to 179 from one test to the other. And then I asked them after the second test, did you think about your cadence at all? No, not at all. Did it increase? Yes, we have the numbers here. So a lot of things should happen because you change how you move, and then that changes your cadence. And the same thing, almost everybody that comes to me knows that you shouldn't overstride. You shouldn't land too much in front of your center of mass. But almost everybody does that. So it's you can't tell people, land under your hip. I mean, how many people have tried that? And if it worked, telling them that, I would be out of work, because that's not how it works. And again, if we go back to Par, how he ran, he threw his foot a little bit too much back compared to his body after the feet left the ground. If mass is moving backwards, the body will, to keep the balance, try to push something in the other direction, and that is forward. So the more your leg swings back, you will probably try to swing the other foot more forward. So we have to really slow and lazy, if you're slow and lazy getting back the foot after it leaves the ground, you will probably overstride. And then you can have a coach that says, no, you should land under your hip. But you will not land under your hip unless you will move the foot faster back forward. And the same thing with the hands. A lot of people talk about the hands and the arms. The arms, a lot of engineers. I have so much problem with engineers. I'm sorry, all engineers. As a group, you suck at running technique. No, you don't. But the explanations you have is like, now I run. The arms should move in the direction of travel because I want to have all the kinetic energy going forward because I'm going forward. Hence, I should move my arms straight forward and backwards. And yes, they are correct. But if you move the hand forward and the hand ends up in front of your body, you will probably move the opposite foot to the same distance in front of your body. I've had a lot of runners who had a lot of injuries, and the injuries come from someone told them you should have 90 degrees in your elbows and move them back and forth. The hands should move forward and backward. And then they throw the hands goes in a straight line forward, too much in front of the body, which will make them overstride, and then they have a problem. But it's the arm that controls the feet. And that's why almost all elite runners have their hands really, really close to their chest at about heart height. Eliud Kipchoge, who has run the marathon below sub 2 hours, his hands rarely leaves his shirt. His hands are very, very close to his chest, to his body all the time. I'm sure you had a question in the beginning of that, but I just kept talking.
I appreciate everyone's different and, doing different things when they run. But is there a cue, like one or two cues that you can say for people to be thinking about that helps to resolve all of these issues? Is it like starting with the arms, for example?
Yeah, starting with the arms. That's very, very good. And since this is a podcast, it's hard to show. But if you have a 90 degree elbow, you will probably have a slower cadence, because that's how physics works. Longer pendulums take longer time to move than shorter pendulums, and that's just how it is. And if you have your hands a bit too far down, your arms becomes longer pendulums and you will have a slower cadence. And it's a greater risk that you move your hands too much in front of the body, which will make you overstride. So we start with the arms. The first thing that I do with almost all runners that comes to me is to make them move their shoulder joint a bit more. Everybody I meet think that they move their arms in the shoulder joints. At least 9 out of 10 don't. They think they do, but they don't. They turn their body. That's what they do. So if you think that your arm is more like a Barbie doll, it's like it's moved like the Barbie doll joint, back and forth. I know I just said you shouldn't move the hands back and forth, but if you get what I mean, that shoulder joint, film yourself. Take your phone, film yourself, and you will see that you probably don't move the shoulder joint that much. Your hands will swing back and forth, but look at the shoulder joint. You should have a really good movement in the shoulder joint. And since we're not supposed to move the hands in front of the body, where should it go? Well, up. So if normally I tell people to have both of their hands close to their chest at about the same height as their heart. Really, I mean, the hands touches the chest. And from there, I make them raise their index fingers. If you look at this on YouTube, you will see me do it. And they are supposed to move the hands more up. The arms and hands move up, up, up in front of the body. That will lift your central mass in the body, which is always good. You shouldn't have a low central mass. This is higher. And with the hands there, you have a very, very sharp angle in your elbow. And that's a shorter pendulum, which swings faster. And when you don't have to turn your body because you have a loose shoulder joint, your Barbie joint, the arms will move faster. You will get your cadence up. Since you have your hands close to the body, you will not risk them come forward in front of the body. And then you take away the risk of more overstride. And that's really easy to try, to have the hands close to the chest. Hands moves more up than forward. If you run like that and think about your loose Barbie joint in your shoulder, and then you bring the hands down to about 90 degrees in your elbow joint. And then you pick the hands up again and take the hands down again. And then you move the hands forward a little bit extra, and then bring the hands closer to the chest one more time. You will immediately feel how your central mass is moved up and down. It will change how you land on your foot, your cadence, and if you overstride or not. And it's super simple. And I always start with this with people I meet because it is so simple, and I just give instruction to them and say, well, I can really feel it, and this is so much easier. And because when I start with something that is really easy and then can immediately feel, oh, but I run faster, but it feels not so hard at all. They will do whatever I say that is harder after that. So this is a very easy way to start, get a higher cadence and decrease the risk of overstride.
Okay, awesome. Okay, great. Is there anyone, I don't know if you watch the elite side of HYROX, is there anyone that you watch in the sport that you think has a particularly good running style? Because there are a range of styles.
I haven't watched them that much.
Okay.
Yeah, normally at HYROX races, I think mostly about what a poor running technique everybody has. because it's also a bit self-selected what kind of running style you have. But people who comes from more of a CrossFit side of the sport, they are probably quite strong. And they do CrossFit because they have a talent for being strong. And then they use their sheer muscle power to run instead of elasticity and technique. It's like throwing a javelin just with your arm. If you're strong enough, you can throw it really far. But if you use your hip and push it with your hip, it's like boxing or swimming or karate or all sport, it starts with the hip and the core. All the powers come from hip and core in all sports that with dynamic movements. But if you're strong enough, you can throw the javelin just with your arm. And that's what they do when they run. They just move their legs and push really hard with their muscles instead of using the power from the hip and core, which will get you so much greater power, and relax the legs. Like when you throw the javelin, you're supposed to be, or throw a ball. More people have thrown a ball than javelin, I would say. So you relax your arm and throw with your body. And the same thing. So a lot of people coming from CrossFit, they just work really, really hard with the muscles and have no technique at all.
Okay. Staying on the topic of HYROX, are there different like techniques that you would use at different stages in the race, or like when you start to fatigue, or when you come out of the lunges, for example? Like, are there any different ways of thinking about running after that as opposed to earlier on in the race?
Yes. I've trained a lot of triathletes in my days also, and it works the same way for them, because when they get off the bike, their legs don't like the running, and nobody likes running after the lunges. You get really, really tired in your legs doing the lunges, and also maybe sled push. But if we talk about the lunges, you're really, really tired, and the legs don't like any more beating. Can I please don't get any more beating? I'm so tired. That's what your legs are telling you. So so less force in the legs. Yeah, they would like less force to have to deal with less force. How do you do that? Well, less vertical force. Well, I already said it. If you move less up and down. So what do? Well, you have a higher cadence because then you move less up and down, and then you have less vertical forces. So after the lunges and all the parts where you've used your legs quite a lot, higher cadence, take really tiny short steps, have your arms really close to your body, and try to have the higher cadence for a while your legs are recovering. And after how long it now takes, 100 meters, your legs start to get fresh, and then your movements can start to get bigger again, and you can start to push off a little harder. The problem is also that yes, that was the answer to your question. Yes, do you have another question? Now we're starting on a new topic. I could feel that, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Choosing a shoe for HYROX.
Yeah.
Is that just like personal preference? What you feel you need, as long as it's got good grip and it feels comfortable to run in, or do you have further opinions about this?
Yes, I have an opinion. I actually just made a YouTube video about this. I published last weekend. And it's funny that you say good grip. You don't need good grip. If you lose your grip during sled push, you have a poor technique. Well, okay. Mostly. I would say actually that's the problem. A lot of people have really, really bad technique, because I work with biomechanics, and since so I'm really a nerd when it comes to how to make it better biomechanically when you do stuff. So I have thought about this a lot, of course. If you look at a person with good technique, they don't slip during the sled push. And I would say, well, if you hold your arms straight in front of you when you push, it's almost like, well, there you go, you're going to slip, because you can't get the power you need to push that sled. A lot of people have like normal, shoes, these super shoes with carbon plate and made for marathons, and they don't slip. And yes, the carpet makes it harder to push the sled, probably harder than at your gym. But on the other hand, the carpet also gives you a better grip for your shoes. It goes both ways. So you can't say, oh, but the sleds, they're much harder to push during the race, therefore I need a better grip. Well, your shoes will have a better grip on the carpet that when you race. So I think you have to review your technique during sled push, because there's too many people that are not even super good, that never slips at all during sled push. And I would say it's you should have a running shoe, not the like Nike Alpha Fly or something like that, because they're way too wobbly and the stack height is way too high. But it is a running race. It is 50%, I would say 60% if you count the rock zone. And if you're doing doubles, it's the percentage of running compared to everything else, it's nothing left. It's only a running race. You should have shoes that will help you run really fast, I would say. I know a lot of people will get angry now and say, I have good technique and I slip, but no, I don't think so.
Is there, you mentioned like the straight arms on the sled push. Is there anything else that you're looking at that people need to be doing differently if they are slipping on the sled push?
Oh yeah, and where you have your central mass, of course, and how much you dare to lean in over the sled. I mean, it's when you start to lean quite a lot in over the sled, for a lot of people it feels uncomfortable to be there, and they won't go there. I had my wife has done a couple of races as well, and she started to push with her straight arms, and she couldn't move the sled. And then I just tried to help her with the technique, and then there wasn't any problem. But she didn't really dare to lean into the sled as much as she needed. But I should be very careful now, because sled pushing is not my specialty. I work with the running technique, so.
Okay. Okay. I wanted to ask you about treadmill versus track and road running. Like, is there a risk like of doing the wrong technique if you're doing only treadmill work or anything like that? Do you have to think about technique differently, like depending on what you're running on or not?
It depends on the treadmill. If you have the one with a motor and the carpet that moves, or you have this, I don't know what they are called, this U-shaped ones. What are they called?
Like the curved treadmill.
Oh, yeah, the curved one. Yeah. So it's a big difference between the curved ones and the normal ones, like they have in gyms, not in CrossFit boxes. If we talk about not the curved one, but the other ones with the carpet that's moving, it is about the same. All the studies I have seen, it is the same effort it takes to run on a treadmill and outside. And it's a little bit harder on your Achilles and calves on the treadmill compared to outside. But on the other hand, you don't have to use your hamstrings that much on the treadmill compared to outside, which can be good to know, because if you have had problems with your hamstrings, it could be better to run on a treadmill, not the curved one, compared to outside. But if you had problems with your Achilles or your calves, maybe you shouldn't run on a treadmill, but you should run outside. And the difference between the curved ones and the flat ones is that it's hard to run with a good technique. I would say it's harder to run with a good technique on the curved ones, because to make them move, you have to run a bit uphill. But if you start to run a little bit too much uphill, they accelerate so super quickly and people get scared. But that's what they are for, to accelerate really, really quickly, so you can train to become a sprinter or something. But so what they do, they don't run that much uphill, but you have to land in the uphill part to make it move. So what do? The normal thing actually people do is that they start to overstride a bit more. So they reach out with their feet a little bit further in front of them, so they reach the little uphill, so they get the treadmill running. And it's always uphill. So your feet will also land at another position, and it will load your muscles, your joints, your tendons in another way than running flat like you do at a HYROX race. And I think that you should train that the thing that you want to be good at and when you're competing. And so people ask me, do you have an incline on your treadmill when I run? And the answer is no. Why should I? Because that's not the same thing. I will have another technique. I will load my body and all the parts in a different way. So when I run on a treadmill, I never run on the curved ones. I don't like them because I can't run with the way I want to. But at the not curved ones, I normally have them completely flat or at the steepest angle that there is. That's just, you know, to work hard with my muscles. But that's the only two positions I have on my treadmill.
Okay. All right, great. Compromise running.
Yeah.
Maybe we spoke about that because we spoke about running after the lunges and so on. But you said to me the thing about compromise running is if people have to practice that a lot, they're just bad runners.
Yes. People are going to be so mad. You're slipping when you're doing the sled push. It's poor technique. And the same thing here, because it's people are not used to start running when their legs are tired, and then they get surprised. But it is like, I listened to one of your podcasts with the woman that has been an elite triathlete and then went to CrossFit and then HYROX. I can't remember her name right now, but she talked about how she could do 150 wall balls unbroken normally at training. And then she did a HYROX and she did like 10 and then she had to rest. But you never talk about, not that much anymore, at least, compromised rowing or compromised farmer's carry. You never talk about that. But I don't think you have to do it to get really, really tight in your legs and then start to run, just so you're not surprised on race day. And when I did my first HYROX, I didn't do any compromised running training at all. And yes, of course, the first, I don't know, through the rock zone, the legs are not fresh. But when I left the rock zone, they are. And I can start to push it. And then I thought, oh, maybe it's because I've done so much triathlon training before. But then I thought, when did I do my last Ironman? Well, it was 2010. And I can't benefit from that training now. It's impossible. But I'm very, very comfortable when it comes to running. I'm super comfortable. It's even if my heart rate is up over threshold pace, I'm still very comfortable doing it. It's like people when they are very comfortable at rowing, they don't have to practice compromised rowing. They sit down and they do it good, and it feels good quite immediately because they are good at rowing. So the people that feel like, oh, compromised running, that's the thing you should do. Well, first of all, maybe it's mostly because you are surprised, because you never in your life first got tired, and then you started to run. Because when you do run training, you start to run with fresh legs, and then when you are tired, you stop, and that's it. You never take a break that long, like you do in HYROX. So it's the surprise thing that you should practice. But it's if you are comfortable with running, it's not a problem. Of course you're tired, but yes, but I don't do compromised, maybe burpee broad jumps either. Of course I do them, but it's not a thing. You don't talk about it in the HYROX community. You talk about the compromised running, and I believe that a lot of people comes from CrossFit and the strength training, and they are not used to that much running and not used to that feeling.
So the primary reason that you think someone would bother with compromise running in training is like purely like the psychological aspect of it.
Yeah. Psychologically, it's really good to train. And I know for the time, I've done a couple of triathlons since 2010, a bit shorter ones, but not that much. But I remember when the season, the biking season, it starts quite late because we can't bicycle year round here in Sweden because we have so much snow. But when the season started and I started to do the first brick session, as you call it in triathlon, you do a hard bike session and then immediately just put on your running shoes and run really hard. The first time I did, it was like, oh, this is so hard, because I had forgotten how hard it was. But after 1 or 2 sessions, it was like, oh, it's fine, because I remember now, it's no problem. So it's a psychological thing mostly, I would say.
Okay. All right. Fantastic. Tell us about your clinic and what you do there and what your machinery does. If someone was interested in visiting you there.
Well, no one will come from Britain, but but what I do here, mostly all day, I come to the place where I'm sitting right now, where I have my treadmill and my cameras. Sometimes I do sessions with people running outside, but mostly on the treadmill with my cameras. People from beginners that just lifted their arse off the sofa and are maybe a bit overweight and have sore knees and whatever, a new hip, come to me and I just want to run for 2 minutes. Is it possible even for me? 2 people in the national team, as I said. And then I try to help them to move in a way that feels better and to move and I try to make it feel like dancing. Because if you had dance, it's one thing to do the movements when you dance, and it's another thing to dance. And the problem is that when you just start telling people, do this, do this, do this, they do the movement, and it's like the choreography for the dance, and it's the first 5 minutes trying to do a complicated choreography dancing thing. But during the first session, a lot of people just come one time and that's enough. When they leave me, they shouldn't feel like they are doing choreography anymore. It just feels like it is relaxed dancing. And that's what I help them try to find. And to my help, then I have the results from these cameras. So when I tell them, oh, so now that when your shoulder moves in this way, what happened now to the lateral forces in your knees? Oh, look, that different shoulder movement decreased the lateral forces with 30 to 50% in your knee. And then, oh, okay, but I had a sore knee, so I had a lot of pain in my knee. So maybe this could help. Yeah, it could. And then they get more motivated of doing what I tell them. So I don't really need the cameras that much, but it's good for me to show people what happens when I teach them this dancing, because everything they can say, oh, I can measure this. I can measure all these forces and how much energy it costs. And then I just, and then I send the results and I send summaries of everything I told them, and I probably will always give them, will give them maybe some strength exercises or something. And then I say bye, and then it's the next client, and then it's the next client, and then it's lunch.
All right, brilliant. And for people that can't or won't visit you in Sweden, you've got a very good YouTube channel as well.
Yes, I have a YouTube channel. I started doing about a year ago. I started doing videos in English as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
And a course, I believe, an online course.
Yes, I have an online course also in English. First I did a Swedish version, of course, and and it worked quite well. So then I did an English version, and that and you can find information about it in the YouTube channel. Watch the YouTube channel first; it's free, and then if you like it, buy my course.
Okay, and then just search your name on YouTube, and they'll find it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think my name is Fredrik Zillén, running technique specialist. That's the name on YouTube.
Okay, awesome. All right, well, thank you. This has been brilliant. Anything else I should have asked you or we should have talked about before we finish up?
Yes, but I think this is enough.
Okay, maybe another time.
Maybe another time.
Okay, all right, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.